This week, the world marked a defining moment in history, the release of Nelson Mandela in 1990. It was a turning point that reshaped South Africa and the global struggle for justice. The celebration would be incomplete without mention of the charitable organization, the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund. It focuses on creating safer environments in homes, schools and communities by reducing vulnerability to abuse, neglect and violence. As part of the celebrations of Mandela's release, the fund is uniquely placed to move this moment beyond commemoration and into urgent, present-day relevance. Dr. Linda Ncube-Nkomo is the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, and she joins us now to speak to us about how the fund has evolved over 3 decades. Good evening. Well, quite a celebration and a long journey since the release of Mandela. How do you feel at this moment?
Good evening and happy Valentine's Day to you, Juliet, and to all the viewers in South Africa. This time it gives us an opportunity as the Children's Fund that is commemorating 30 years of existence to stop and look at what we've been able to achieve in the lives of children. You've talked about the fact that we look at the safety of children, and our looking at safety of children is now moving into looking at their online safety. But over and above the safety of children, we also look at their ability to survive, develop and thrive. So the Under 5 program that lands so nicely with the sonar address of the President on Thursday, that we've got to be looking at Under 5 mortality and have stunting stopped in the next couple of years so that we can give every child in South Africa an opportunity to not just survive, but to develop and to thrive. Because in the absence of developing cognitively as well as physically, we can register hundreds of thousands of ECD centers, we can have the right trained teachers and facilities, but if the child for whom all these things are being done is not developed, then we're not going to see the outcomes that we need to see with the investment that's put in children. So it gives us an opportunity to celebrate 30 years of existence, but to also stop and reflect in terms of what do we need to do differently as civil society, as the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, but working with strategic partners in the children's sector, as well as with government, to future-proof children, ensure that we can have a generation that's not only safe, but that's well-nourished, a generation that's living in homes where they have adequate, nutritious food every single day, and they can be empowered to use their voices and meet their full potential.
Dr. Linda, how does the fund balance immediate interventions for vulnerable children with longer-term systemic change and advocacy?
So one of the things that we do is to work with strategic partners, because in order to achieve sustainable change, it's not one organization that can be able to do it alone. So being able to link arms with other players in the sector to pull those strategic levers that can enable the changes that we need to make. But in doing that work, what is really important to amplify is the voices of children themselves, to be able to pause and create platforms such as the Africa Children's Summit that we had in April of 2025, where we had about almost 300 children from across the continent coming together in a child-led conference to be able to say to policymakers on the continent, to say to them, we need to be seen, we need to be heard, we need to be engaged, and these are the issues that affect us as children on the continent. So constantly making sure that the diversity of voices on various platforms of policy making include the voices of children.
A few moments ago, you mentioned online threats for children. What do you see as the most urgent threats to children's dignity and well-being today? And how is the fund positioning itself to address them in a practical, sustainable way? And I'd like you to focus, please, that question on online threats and what can and is being done to protect our children.
So online threats is really becoming bigger and bigger an issue that we're focusing on as the fund as we move into the next 30 years of our existence. We cannot run away from the fact that children are going to be living more and more in an online world. And so we engage with children themselves to understand what are the issues that make them unsafe, that need to be taken into account in terms of their online presence. But over and above themselves, what is really going to be important is not to leave the onus of online safety in the hands of children or in the hands of caregivers only, but to also be able to put responsibility on the providers of platforms so that they're putting in the guardrails to ensure that when when danger is depicted, there can be a raising of alarm for action to come into place for children. So we need to make sure that children do have access to technology because the world is moving that way, but to also make sure that that environment is secured for their safety now and into the future.
And lastly, Mandela often spoke about the moral test of a society being how it treats its children. In your view, how's South Africa measuring up to that test 3 decades into democracy?
We're failing dismally, and the fail rate is below even a 30%. And the question that we need to be asking ourselves is, as a child, what did I need to make sure that I felt secure, that I felt safe, feel like I was treated with dignity and respect, and then go out and make sure that every child within our sphere of influence is given that dignity and respect, because they are human beings and they have human rights, even though they are at the age of children. Their rights start when they're children and not after they've turned 18.
Thank you so much for your time this evening. Dr. Linda Ncube-Nkomo, CEO of the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund.